New week, new video. Can't stop, won't stop modifying the Benelli. The modification train continues. This week, we're focusing on the rear shock with this, a monoshock from Racing Bros. So let's get into unboxing. So, the reason why I picked this up and why I want to upgrade the rear shock in the first place is that the stock one doesn't have too much adjustability and I don't like the spring rate. This one actually had a spring rate in mind. In addition to that, with preload, it also has an adjustable rebound. Ooh. And as a bonus, it matches the color scheme. How cool is that? Okay, let's be honest with ourselves, we got it because the color matches the bike really well. But as a bonus, it has a properly rated spring for my weight, and it has the adjustable rebound up here. So as I mentioned, I picked this up because the stock suspension on Benelli, and pretty much all mini-motos in general, they're way too soft all the way around. The Honda Grom, famously, their forks are so soft, their spring rate is so low that it barely holds its own weight. Just ask me how many times I bottomed out the Grom over a speed bump. It's that bad. So before throwing this on, I wanted to test just how soft the stock suspension is by measuring the bike's sag. Sag's how much the suspension is compressed when you add the weight of a rider to the bike. Now, naturally, there's no factory sag settings out there for Benelli TNT 135s, none that I could find at least. So I had to use a rule of thumb. Now, there's another YouTube video out there from a very popular motorcycle channel that had a video on this subject, and they're using a rule of thumb, which I'm going to apply here, which is 1/4 of the total suspension travel. That should be your rider sag. Thank you, Ari. Thankfully, the Benelli's website does measure out their total travel, and according to that, it's 50 millimeters in the rear, so 1/4 of that, my goal is 12.5 millimeters of sag when I swing a leg over the bike. So sag is actually pretty easy to measure. You can do this with a ruler or a tape measure and measure from the axle to some fixed point somewhere on the rear of the bike. Once off the bike and then once on the bike. And when you're on the bike, make sure to wear all your gear. I even put my backpack on. And then take the difference. It's easier to have a friend help out, but I made do with a ruler taped to a dowel and using my old friend the GoPro here to film the axle to record the difference on versus off. So here's some stills from the GoPro footage, and this is the stock shock with the preload that it came from the dealership with. First noting the point on the ruler just standing the bike up on its own. Then I jumped on myself with gear and everything, measured the difference between these 2 points, and we got 24 millimeters, way off from the target goal. I adjusted the preload a few different times, ultimately getting to the point where I was over halfway up the threads. I measured it one last time and found that this got me 19 millimeters. We were going in the right direction, but at this rate, it would have to be all preload and no shock at all. So as I assumed, the spring rate is way too low, even for me. This Racing Bro shock, on the other hand, is rated for me. It has 3 different spring rates that you can use, and so I purchased the lighter one. It's the sub 195 pounds. With this, I shouldn't have so much preload set to get me where I want. But enough talk, let's throw it on the bike. Oh. Alright, here we go. I got everything prepped. Got a jack down there to keep the bike from falling over. And I also have this piece of wood that I'm going to wedge here just to make sure that the bottom doesn't slam, because I am taking out pretty much the crux of holding up this rear. So let's get going. All right, we got it in. took a little bit longer than I expected, as you probably saw on the time lapse. I was hoping I wouldn't have to take this off. I was also hoping I didn't have to take out the guard I made for the intake, but a couple things. The stock shock was tough to get out with that plate in the way, so I had to get it out. Unfortunately, had a bit of a impact with this. Also, this needs to be remade because the cutout that I have here was intended for a much smaller radius. So this one's much beefier, and it's got the rebound settings in the way, and I want to make sure that this is accessible down here. So I'm going to have to basically make a 2.0 version of the guard. So it's not in there right now, can't install it yet. I'm gonna have to cut it up or just basically make another one. I don't know. This looks really cool. I love the fact this spring matches the color here on the decals, so it's perfect. It's like I planned it. Now, it's super soft right now. The settings are basically, it has 0 preload, so the shock is almost suspended in here a little bit, just basically compressed by just the top weight of the bike right now. But we'll get to adjusting it. All right, got the seat back on, we got the fender back on, and we have this tightened up. So thankfully, this actually came with the chart here. And there's a couple different bikes that they reference, one of which is this, which is MSX/Grom. So we're gonna use that as reference. And basically what this is saying is that based on your rider weight, including your gear, how long should the spring be in millimeters here. So based on my rider weight, I was able to tighten this down enough so that this measured distance here is exactly what it says in the chart. Now, I haven't set the sag settings yet, but I'm assuming that with this measurement in place, it should be pretty close. It actually does call out here in this chart that the sag should be between 10 to 20 millimeters, and that was pretty much what my goal was from the stock ones, just based on the travel of the stock shock, which was 12.5 millimeters, so a little on the lower end of that 10 to 20 range, but that's what I'm going to expect with this as well. So let's actually do the measurement and find out if this is right where it's at, and if not, we can make some minor adjustments. That was smooth. All right, so here we are a few days later. Now I went ahead and checked the sag from the settings that I had, and it actually was a little surprising. It was about 17 millimeters, which is a little higher than I was expecting, just given how stiff it feels. But it's within Racing Brothers specifications at 10 to 20 mils, so I think it's okay for now. I didn't realize until now just how springy the stock shock was now that I have this on, because it feels planted, almost like it's kind of glued to the road, even on bumps. It's really nice. So in addition to checking the sag, I also made the 2.0 version of the intake shroud, and it came out really, really nice. So basically what I ended up doing was I made a cutout, then bent it higher up above the shock, so that way I could still access the rebound underneath. I even went so far as to put door edge trim on the sides to keep it from scratching the inside of the frame. It's really nice. It fits perfect, almost like a factory fit. I'm so happy with it now. So I haven't touched the rebound settings at all yet. They're as they were from Racing Brothers, so it's basically straight down the middle. That's something I'm just gonna have to play with over time. The more I ride the bike, I can kind of go up and down depending on how it feels, make adjustments as necessary. So it's also doing a pretty good job of absorbing the bumps. I definitely still feel them, but the damping is there. So overall, I'm super happy with this. It feels a lot more planted, not as springy, and it's very confidence boosting as a result. My one quibble is that it makes the front forks just seem a little bit soft, and I was expecting that. That's exactly what happened when I did this suspension on the Grom. So I don't think much needs to be done, honestly. They're 41 millimeter forks, so they're pretty stiff already. I think just a change in fork oil should do the trick. So thanks so much for taking a look. See you next time.